Great. Recording. We're recording. Everything's on. Here we go. So I I have a few questions because we're still trying to figure out what it is exactly is going on. There's a lot of bickering back and forth, um, and so I figured you're the person since you are. I think you've got some things going on where you're trying to stop people from doing certain particular things right now that sort of will affect that this initiative will affect. So first of all, if you can introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are and what you guys do at Watchdog.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Court. I'm president of Consumer Watchdog. We've been in business since 1985, fighting for the public. Our motto is expose, confront, change. And we've been fighting against insurance companies, utility companies, oil companies, banks, anyone who's trying to take advantage of the little guy. We fought against them and a lot of times stopped them. We started with a big rate regulation of the insurance companies at the ballot box in 1988 called Prop 103. And according to the Consumer Federation of America, it saved consumers $150 billion with a B because it's the toughest regulation in the country. So we have concerns about people messing with the auto insurance system. Back in 88, the companies actually tried to do something very similar to what Uber's trying to do and to cap contingency fees. They said trial lawyers are out of control. That's why the insurance rates are out of control. We said, no, it's the profits. We got to limit the profits. And we did limit the profits. And we regulated the industry. And we've had moderate costs for auto insurance in the state and home insurance in the state. We've had our legal rights. So this isn't a crisis driven by costs because insurance costs are not high in California and we have full liability. So we're trying to show here that Uber's basically very self-serving in its goals here. I can get into that now or later. You want me to just get into it now or?
Yeah.
The question is, how concise do you want my answers, or do you want me to just say everything I'm going to say?
If you want to start by saying everything you want to say, and then I can ask.
All right, that's good. Let's do that. All right, so Uber's strategy here clearly is not about helping the little guy. It's not about helping the consumer. It's about getting immunity for itself and its business practices. First, it has a problem with background checks. It doesn't do thorough background checks. It doesn't fingerprint people. It doesn't check drivers carefully. And that has huge ramifications for the people who ride in those vehicles, not only because we have literally an epidemic of sexual assaults in Ubers that the New York Times uncovered, but this affects people who ride in Ubers, people who ride around Uber drivers. We know that Uber has missed background checks for people who have had double DUIs, that have phony licenses, that are not supposed to be driving, that use fake licenses in order to get an Uber status. And Uber doesn't do a good job. For a little bit more money, they could do a better job. They don't want to. They want as many cars on the road as possible, and that's put a lot of people's lives in jeopardy. And, well, you're going to have a lot of these stories, but we have learned of lots of stories of people who've been injured, maimed, killed by Uber drivers who should never have been on the road because Uber didn't do a background check. And Uber likes it that way. Uber could easily, for another $30 for background check, do a thorough background check and find out if the person has a DUI, if they're a safe driver, if they are who they are. They don't want to spend that $30. It's literally $30. So this is about protecting Uber from liability by preventing people from getting attorneys. The second thing this is about is Uber's strategy to move to robo-taxis or autonomous vehicles as quickly as possible. Right now, they have a terrible record with autonomous vehicles. They have the first autonomous vehicle to have killed a pedestrian. Uber in Arizona in 2018 had a robo-taxi that was testing. A person comes into the path of the car. The car recognizes it 6 seconds before impact and doesn't throw on the brakes because it wasn't programmed to brake if it saw someone coming in. Just a minor programming error, and someone died. It was the first death, and Uber stopped testing its robotaxis after that. Now Uber all of a sudden is saying, we are going to go back out with these robotaxis and have 20,000 taxis on the California roads by late 2026, after they pass an initiative that's going to make it almost impossible to sue them. And that is a business strategy. And the people they're testing with do not have a good record. Waymo has driven literally tens of millions of miles. And Waymos, according to the DMV records, can go 20,000 miles without a human intervention because the computer is that good. The company that Uber's partnering with is a company called Nuro, and according to reports by the California DMV, they can only go 700 miles before the computer has to have a human intervention because it can't handle the job. And Nuro is only tested for 160,000 miles in California in 2025, where Waymo's done 3 million miles of testing, and these other companies that are testing seriously have done millions of miles. This is not a serious effort to be safe. Also, Uber cars are the ones they're developing with Lurid and Nuro are much cheaper to make than the Waymo cars. The Waymo cars have, you see them, they have 6, 7 LiDAR sensors, very expensive sensors, always spinning. And Uber wants to have one LiDAR sensor on the car because it wants to save money. Waymo vehicles are anywhere between $150,000 and $250,000. That's the range. According to online reports, Uber's vehicle is going to cost $70,000. So Uber wants to do it cheap, and they want to deploy these vehicles as quickly as possible. They want to get rid of the drivers, and they don't care about the passengers getting injured because they won't have the rights to get a contingency fee attorney if this initiative passes. And we can talk a little bit about why if you want.
Sure. Now, so you're saying that, in short, do you think that this has been a premeditated
Yes.
a journey for them to start with 22 to now this to now to prepare themselves?
I think this is all about Uber getting very greedy and having a business model where they want to free as much capital as possible. And that means getting rid of their drivers, which means going the robo-taxis, which means they need limited liability if they do that because they will be sued if their robo-taxis fail and kill people. But under this initiative, people are not able to get attorneys. So many people are not going to be able to recover their damages. So I think it is all part of a grand master plan that Uber's involved in. First, to allow itself off the hook for failure to do background checks, and ultimately, as it eases in robo-taxis, to make it easier to go quicker with the robo-taxis that aren't safe because there won't be full liability. That's all this is about. This isn't about protecting people from billboard lawyers. This isn't about getting people more money on a lawsuit settlement. This is about preventing you from getting a lawyer at all, from having representation at all. And the way this works under the initiative is it says 75% of the money must go to the victim. But that's not true. That would imply that only the attorney can only take 25%. But in the fine print in the initiative, it says that the 25% goes both to medical expenses and the attorney, which means you're not going to get an attorney because if you have $1 million policy, which is a large policy, and you're seriously injured and you have $250,000 in medical expenses, there's nothing left for the attorney to take if 25% is available for medical expenses and attorney's fees, and medical expenses have to come first. Moreover, it doesn't prevent you actually from owing more than $250,000 in medical expenses, because there's nothing that can prevent when people get in accidents and injured, the people who provide care for them, even if it's under their own health plan, they put a lien on that to get it back from the person who caused the accident. So if you have $500,000 in medical bills and $1 million, the lien holder can take that $500,000. But for the purpose of calculating an attorney's fee, that medical expenses have to pay first. And if it's more than 25%, the attorney gets nothing, which means the attorney's not going to take the case. So this impacts seriously injured people. This impacts the disabled. People who have large medical bills are not going to be able to get attorneys under this initiative. And that's what's by design. And if they had wanted to limit attorneys' contingency fees to 25%, they would have done that. They didn't do that. They said 75% has to go to the victim, and that 75% does not include medical expenses.
Now you talk about the fine print. Where is that? 'Cause
It's
I'm
right.
looking for it. I'm looking for it.
Well, it's very easy. Like, it's in section 1A says that you can't enter into an agreement with an attorney if the attorney's going to if 75% of the total recovery doesn't go to the victim. And then if you go to the definition of total recovery, it says total recovery are damages except for medical expenses, liens on medical expenses, and charges for the attorney's fees, which means that has to come out of the 25% that is reserved for the attorney's fees and medical expenses, since it's excluded from the definition of total recovery. And that's the trick. This is the evil genius trick that Uber's done. It doesn't. If it wanted to say 25% contingency fee, it could have just said it, and then costs of prosecution, medical expenses, whatever, those would come out of 75%. But it didn't do that. It specifically excluded from the 75% medical expenses and liens.
Talk to me about how they tried to title this, which is self-dealing lawyers. Talk to me about how they're trying to prey on this notion that lawyers are that there are some unethical lawyers that.
Yeah, this is very targeted to what they call billboard lawyers, and billboard lawyers who take more than they probably should, and also billboard lawyers who they allege get kickbacks from the doctors who they do business with. No doubt there are abuses here. No doubt there are cases where people do take too much. They take 50% of a recovery, and there's no doubt there are overcharges on medical bills in some cases. But this initiative throws the baby out with the bathwater. It basically says that in every auto accident cases, not just cases against Uber, every auto accident case in the state, you cannot enter into a contract with an attorney if your medical expenses are more than 25%. It's illegal. The attorney can get prosecuted for a misdemeanor if that happens. And when you're starting a case, you don't even know what the medical expenses are. You don't know if they're more than 25% or not. No attorney is going to take a case under this initiative, and that is by design. These are smart people. They didn't make a mistake in writing this initiative. They are smart people. And they wrote it specifically to discourage any attorney from taking a case of someone who's seriously injured.
And talk to me also about what other aspects of liability that includes, which is product liability or roadside or anything. It's really anything that's involved in on. Do you know?
Well, yeah, I think I don't know this, but I feel like legal experts say, and I would concur that this is not limited just to motor vehicle accidents. This is also product designs in which a car has a defective steering wheel, a defective seat back, a defective airbag, and the motor vehicle gets into an accident. So this implicates product liability cases too. And these product liability cases are cases where people get seriously injured because the vehicle is not built in the right way. A good case is the case of the woman who the seat back wasn't constructed correctly on a Toyota. Oh, well, actually, I can't say that. It wasn't constructed correctly. You're not supposed to know it's Toyota.
Why aren't you supposed to know?
Because it's confidential. But you can't. That you have to strip out, or I will get sued for defamation, and I won't be able to sue you for defamation under that agreement. So
no. I will mention it because also I know that they have a confidentiality. But then I want to talk.
But the point is the seat. Yeah, the point is the seat back failed, and the woman is paraplegic for life, quadriplegic for life, and she was able to recover from the manufacturer to prove that it was defective. But for this initiative, she would not have been able to because her medical bills were the lion's share of everything that she recovered. And if the medical bills and the attorney's fees were more than 25% of her recovery, the attorney wouldn't be able to handle the case by law. Or he could be sued for a misdemeanor and lose his bar license. This puts an absolute bar on an attorney handling a case, not only getting paid, but handling a case where the medical bills and his fees total more than 25%. And for seriously injured accident victims, they easily total more than 25%, particularly when we have people who are confined to a wheelchair for life.
Certainly.
And we, by the way, think that this is a constitutional deficiency in the initiative. We think this discriminates against people who are disabled, because if you're disabled, you're not allowed to get an attorney. That's targeting a class of people. But it's not enough we wouldn't be able to bring that case until after the initiative passed.
But there's a First Amendment problem here too about not being able to choose your own lawyer.
There may be a right to contract, but we're putting it in the state constitution.
Right.
So by putting it in the state constitution, you're giving it a certain level of constitutional protection. But I think there's a cogent case that if the people who are targeted by this initiative are the seriously injured, and these are the disabled people, and they're prohibited from getting a contingency fee attorney just by nature of their disability, that runs afoul of the state and federal constitutions.
I'm speaking with constitutional lawyers about it who are going to try and give a handle on that, so I'll
Yeah.
have an answer for that as well. But going back a second to the product liability, how long? I think one of the things that they're hoping is that because it takes so long to prove a product liability and the amount of money that lawyers have
Right,
to spend.
exactly.
So
Yeah, I mean, lawyers have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on experts to prove a product liability case, and and depositions and animation and doing research on the vehicles, and they don't get that money unless they win the case on a contingency fee. So if they're told you're not able to get your contingency fee because your medical expenses are more than 25%, and that is they're not going to invest the money in the case just up front. They're not going to all of the product liability cases involving auto accidents, all of the auto accident cases where there's seriously injured people. These are not going to be cases anymore.
as a consumer watchdog, as a protector of people's interest and consumers' interest, what do you say to somebody who tells you these lawyers take too much and make too much?
They absolutely, many of them do, and what we need to do is have greater discipline. Yeah, many. I mean, look, some lawyers absolutely take too much of an award. Some lawyers probably do have unethical agreements with doctors. I haven't witnessed it, but I can imagine it. But the point being is you target those people who abuse the system with state bar punishments and penalties. We now have a law that limits advertising if it's fraudulent advertising, and if people are involved in unethical agreements with lawyers, then you can with doctors. If lawyers are involved in unethical agreements with doctors, they can be sued for those unethical. In fact, Uber did bring a RICO case against someone for this. And I don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't know if it's kosher or not. But the point is, there are avenues to target people when they're abusing that agreement. But don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's the point. And the initiative also limits medical recovery altogether. For people who don't have insurance, it limits it to a very low percentage of Medicaid and Medicare. People are not going to get treated. And this is how it works in practice. So you get injured in a car accident and something happens to your spine. You need an MRI. You know how long, if you're a Kaiser patient, it takes to get an MRI? Like months. And if you wait months, you know what's going to happen? There's no causation related to the accident. So the attorney's got to get you that MRI. Someone's going to have to lay out a couple of $1,000s for the MRI. They put it on a lien. Under this initiative, the value of that MRI is only the cost of Medicaid or Medicare, which is not anywhere near the cost of the MRI. So this is designed to discourage people from getting medical care quickly after an accident. Getting medical care quickly after an accident not only is helping them heal quicker, but it's also helping you preserve your case for causation. So you need the specialized care that these doctors offer, the spinal surgeons, the chiropractors, it's invaluable to accident victims because the traditional HMO or healthcare system often doesn't have that type of expertise. But the initial exam, the initial workup in order to show that you were actually injured in the accident has to happen very in close proximity to that accident. Otherwise, they're going to argue causation. And most people can't get an MRI that quickly.
And because people are often saying, hey, they have health insurance. Why all these lawsuits? Why all these?
Well, the other thing is the health insurers put a lien on the care that's related to that accident. Even though you have health insurance, whatever care you get under your health insurance policy, the health insurance company is entitled to it back when the case settles, which is why people have big medical bills. Because whether it's they don't have insurance or they have insurance, they're getting care and there's a total running. And if it exceeds 25%, that means not only do the attorney can't get anything for their time, but they're actually precluded legally from taking the case on a contract. So if they see large medical bills and they know it's probably more than 25% of the value of the policy, they're not going to take the case. And the whole point of the contingency fee system is attorneys put the money in on the front end, and there's liens on the care given so that they get paid on the back end. But the person gets the care. The person gets to prove their case. The person has legal representation. You take that all away if this initiative passes, and you leave people on their own when injured, dealing with an insurance company or a company like Uber that doesn't want to pay them anything, and they're not going to get anything.
Explain to me how they're trying to sell this to the public in that case. How the hell are they going to get this through?
Well, they're gonna
telling me
yeah.
what's their
Well, they're going to try to do a little misdirection. They're going to basically say, "Look, we want to get consumers more, and in these cases, attorneys have taken 50% of the recovery, and that's too much." And they may be right, or maybe in some cases, people have put 50% in. I don't know. But the point being is, without the contingency fee system, they wouldn't get 0% of the recovery. And there are going to be abuses. We know that there are people who take more than their clients get. And that happens in some cases. But the vast majority of cases, accident victims get a larger recovery when they're represented. We know this from statistics. We know that 84% of the time, if you're getting recovered from the insurance company, it's because you're represented by a attorney. We know that that people with attorneys get a larger settlement even after those fees are paid. This is just statistics. And if you run across a lousy attorney, I feel bad for you because I know people who had lousy attorneys, but throwing the baby out with the bathwater isn't the way to go.
Speak to me about corporations and insurance companies trying to legislate, claiming that they have the public's best interest at heart.
Yeah, it's really ironic. It's really ironic that we have a company like Uber with a horrible record of both allowing drivers through who committed sexual assault, drivers through with DUIs who then literally kill people on the roads, to say that they care about the public when they're not fixing the things they can fix, which is their background check system, which is protecting the public by having cameras in their cars. The reason they don't want cameras in their cars, they want to take more responsibility for the drivers, is because they don't want to have them as employees, because it'd be more expensive to have them as employees and independent contractors. Uber doesn't care about you. They don't care. They care about the bottom line. And what they want to do is limit how much they pay out in insurance payments and insurance claims, especially as I understand it, and you should get some more information on this. I understand that they're basically self-funded. So they deal with carriers, but ultimately they have money that they set aside for those claims. The carriers administer the claims, but they put that money aside. So if they have got $4 billion aside for insurance claims and they take away your lawyer, then they'll take some of that money and move it over somewhere else in the company. That's what it's all about. It's about saving money. It's not about saving lives or protecting people. It's about protecting them from liability when they allow a lousy driver through and the lousy driver hits someone or hurts someone or kills someone. And it's allowing them to develop their business strategy of going to robo-taxis quicker when they're not safe and they're not ready for prime time. We know it takes years and literally hundreds of millions of miles to develop a safe robo-taxi. Waymo has committed hundreds of millions of miles and they still don't have a safe robo-taxi. Uber's starting literally from scratch because they dropped the program in 2019 and they started it literally a couple of months after announcing this initiative. And to say that they're not related is just, it doesn't make sense. Of course they're related.
You're pretty sure that ultimate goal, this is why that's driving this machine.
Absolutely. This is all about Uber trying to accelerate and liquidate its liabilities, both for its drivers and ultimately for its driverless cars, and doing it through limited liability. It's the quickest way. If you think about it, the quickest way for Uber to make more money is for it to limit its liability and to get rid of its drivers. Then what do you have? Then you got cars that are can run over someone and you don't have to pay if they do. Cars that don't have drivers who you don't have to pay, and they can still charge the same amount for the damn ride. That is Uber's total goal, is to get rid of the people. And if it happens to kill someone, because something goes wrong, well, that person's not going to have a lawyer, so we may have to pay, but we're not going to have to pay as much as we would otherwise.
Talk to me a bit in the same, this is sort of in the same sort of category, but the AB5, I think, and Prop 22, Like,
AB 30.
if you,
Oh, you want, well, the unemployment. All right, let me tell you about the sequence of events last year, first of all. All right, the sequence of events is Uber promised, I mean, to tell you this company is a backstabbing company. And I say that based on fact, not opinion, based on what they've done, which is backstab the unions, backstab the legislators, and backstab the lawyers, and backstab the consumers. Here's that they did just in 2025. In 2025, they told the unions, we're going to let you unionize, and we're going to, if you help us lower our uninsured motorist coverage from $1 million to $60,000. We say it again, from $1 million down to $60,000. That is, if an uninsured motorist hits someone in Uber and hurts them, they're liable for $60,000 rather than $1 million, which is not enough. And they're a big company, so they should be liable for more.
and the goal for doing that?
The goal for doing it is save money. That's all about saving them money. It's not about protecting the consumer, the customer. So they got the unions on board with that. We'll have the right to unionize, and we're going to get you that. And it passed the legislature because of the power of the unions over the Democrats in the California legislature unanimously. No one voted no against it. A day after that bill was signed, a day later, they filed the initiative to limit the right of consumers to contingency fees. A day after the legislature just gave them this huge gift, they want more. And they're going to steal money from consumers to promote this on the ballot, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So they waited till the governor signed the bill to follow the initiative, because if they had followed it before, the governor wouldn't have signed the bill.
This is this initiative.
Yes.
Where does 22 come in?
Let me come back. Then,
Sorry.
hey, go for it.
Speak behind you. Thanks.
It would have been cool you coming through.
Okay.
It's okay, no worries.
Then,
Keep that train of thought,
Yeah.
please.
then, like less than a month and a half later, they announced we're going to robo-taxis. We're going to put 20,000 robo-taxis on California's road in 2026. This is after cutting a deal with the union saying we're going to let you unionize. Well, are we going to unionize a robo-taxi? You can't unionize a robo-taxi. The unions must have been totally angry. They stabbed them in the back. They stabbed the legislature in the back. They stabbed the consumer in the back. They stabbed the consumer attorney in the back. And they stabbed the unions in the back. So now we've got everything they got in 2025, which is the reduction in uninsured motorist coverage. And now they're going for more, going to accelerate robo-taxis, going for limited liability. Years ago, they fought in the legislature to win the right to exempt Uber drivers and Lyft drivers from being considered employees. And they went to the legislature, and allegedly they lost in the legislature, and then they went to the ballot and they won at the ballot box. They spent their money convincing people that it was better for the drivers. They'll make more money if we allow them to be independent contractors. We don't need them to be like taxi drivers. Of course, that will prevent Uber from having responsibility for their health insurance and their other benefits. But Uber actually convinced the voters of that. Fast forward, not that many years. Now they're saying, we're going to robo-taxis. Screw those workers we wanted to protect with the independent contract status. They're totally disingenuous. They're a shitty company. They're a company that that will do whatever it can in the moment to make as much profit as possible. And that is part of the ballot measure process. People seeing Uber for what it is. Uber doesn't have any allies in this. We have the doctors, we have the lawyers, we have the consumer groups, we have the patient groups. Who's on Uber's side here? The insurance companies? I mean, the insurance companies are silent partners in this because they're going to benefit from it.
Why are they not in? Why are they silenced?
Because they've got such bad brand identity that if it said paid for by State Farm, everybody would know what it is. Uber's got a little bit better brand ID. But if the insurance companies came in, it would kill the whole plan, because everybody would know that the insurance companies don't want us to have attorneys when we deal with them. It's a little less intuitive, but it's the same thing with Uber. They don't want people to have attorneys when they deal with Uber and their claims.
Go back to 22 and explain to me, because what fascinating me that I ask lawyers is, you didn't see this coming. Prop 22 is going to say that these drivers are independent contractors. How are you going to sue them? You didn't see that coming? Was there any attempt by the lawyers to battle 22? Did anybody try to battle 22? Where were you on that side of the?
Let me just text my son something.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
You know,
filming at work. So yes, your question is, where were we during Prop 22? And where were the lawyers during Prop 22?
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead, take your time.
let me just be back. How long we have, you think?
For us, as long as you give me.
Like, how long do you need? Another 40 minutes, 30
No,
minutes? Yeah, okay. I'll be back by
If we can hit
1:30.
everything, then we're good.
Yeah, good. All right. So, I mean, we were all amazed that Uber would have the chutzpah to take on the legislature in that way, and the unions in that way. And we were, of course, on the side of the unions, thinking that this should be a job where you have a wage employee in there because people get better benefits when they have it. And Uber's a rich company and it can afford to do better. But Uber managed to convince the public otherwise. So we were all opposed to it. And the unions were really opposed to it. But Uber made their argument. And they had some Uber drivers who came out and said, yeah, we'll do better as an independent contractor. And they gave some kind of deal where they were going to, if people drive a certain amount of time, they'd make some type of contribution towards their benefits. So they kind of monkeyed around with it and gave the workers a little something. But ultimately, we should have seen it coming when they're not going to abide by a decision made by the state and they're going to write their own rules. This is about Uber writing its own rules. It did like the fact that it said its drivers had to be employees, so it changed the rules. It doesn't like being accountable for when its drivers cause deaths or sexually assault people. It's trying to change the rules. That's what Uber's about. It's about living above and beyond the rules.
Well, quickly, when they, in terms of 22, they said, yeah, you're an independent contractor, but we still get to set the prices. So all of a sudden you have independent contractors that can't even set their own prices.
Right. They have no bargaining power.
They have no bargaining power with the company.
Exactly. They have no bargaining power, and that's the way Uber wants them. And Uber pulled the wool over Californians' eyes, and Californians bought it. And that's what we're left with now. We're left with a situation where Uber sets the price. They don't have any competition in the market. They can pay their drivers as little as they want. And now they're trying to replace the drivers because they can, and they're trying to get liability laws that help them replace their drivers even quicker. Unions should be outraged by this. And in fact, the unions we talk to are very much against this initiative for this reason.
Do they recognize the mistake and how they got screwed, the unions?
Well, the unions fought back.
Yeah,
The unions fought back. But Uber's got a lot of money, and it's got a lot of pollsters, and it's got a lot of people. On this ballot measure, it's not as popular, honestly. This ballot measure doesn't poll more than 50% on the natural. So people don't want to change the contingency fee system. They don't want to limit medical recovery for accident victims. They don't want to do it. Now, is Uber going to spend $200 million of its money to get that to happen? Yes. And one of the reasons is actually something I think you should cover in your documentary. It's the self-interest of the consultants at work. We have Mona Prieto, who is the head of public policy, who's driving all of this, and her fiancé is a guy named Juan Rodriguez. Juan Rodriguez and his company, Bearstar, have the contract to do all the media work for this ballot measure. And when you do the media work for a ballot measure, you get 15 to 20% of the value of the buy. 100 million, 200 million, what is that? 20, $40 million going to the Prieto household? That's a windfall. So there is a conflict of interest incentive. We wrote to the Uber board of directors saying, you got to tell your shareholders about this. You got to one of your big executives dictating policy who's going to benefit from this initiative personally in a way that's not disclosed. And you got to disclose it. They ignored us. We know from the campaign reports that I've seen already, this is before anything gets going, that in 24, the year that they got engaged, and this was before this initiative, this was just on legislative campaigns, Bearstar made millions. And the principals in Bearstar made millions between the media buying company and the consulting fees. And the media buying company is owned and controlled by Juan Rodriguez, who's on the board, and the other partners at Bear Star. And I can show you this all on paper. You can actually follow the money trail between these two companies. We're talking millions of dollars. I think it was $4 million. I got to refresh my memory, and that was just for legislative campaigns. Now, some of that money went to the media buy, but it shows up as $4 million to Bear Star, and that's chump change compared to what they're going to get for this ballot measure, because when you start at less than 50% on a ballot measure, you're not likely to win unless you pump 200, 300 million in. If this ballot measure goes and they really want to win, they're going to have to pump more money into this ballot measure than anyone's ever pumped into a ballot measure in the history of the initiative process. There's no way to win this ballot measure if you don't do that, particularly when you have money opposition on the other side.
Which the lawyer's trying to raise.
Lawyers trying to raise money. So
It's a little bit different than drivers trying to, and unions fighting, and then lawyers.
well, we have lawyers and doctors.
Right.
We've got doctors and lawyers really outraged by this and willing to step up and say this impacts the entire healthcare delivery system and the legal services delivery system. It's both. Because if you limit liens on care, doctors can't give you care. I mean, especially if it's outside your health plan, and a lot, as we talked about, you need care outside of your health care plan to get it quicker sometimes, or to get specialized care, or to get spinal surgery, all these things that the ordinary healthcare system doesn't deal with, that someone with a traumatic injury needs, both orthopedic and sometimes brain injury care.
And in that vein, talk to me about the section in there that talks about equating the medical expenses to Medicare.
All right. Well, there's something that says that right now you can recover whatever medical expenses are required to care for you as long as it's reasonable. I mean, a jury would determine what's reasonable. If the jury thought the medical expenses were extreme now, they could disallow that. But this initiative puts a hard cap on those. It's like 170% of Medicare and less on Medicaid, which is peanuts. I mean, Medicare pays nothing. Medicaid pays nothing. So you're not going to get people to give you an MRI or a CAT scan when you're getting those rates that Medicaid and Medicare pays. And that's designed to prevent people from getting care, which would help them improve their injuries, but also prevents them from getting care.
Do you think that it affects the quality of care?
Absolutely. You're not going to get a doctor who's of any worth to do that care if you're getting Medicaid and Medicare rates.
We talked about the jury making these decisions. Tell me about your. This is I don't know if it's a personal question, but tell me about how you feel about the civil justice system and overall in dealing with matters like this. Do you think that juries can be trusted? Do you think that?
I mean, juries are a bedrock part of our democracy. It's a Seventh Amendment right to trial. I mean, literally, this is part of the Bill of Rights. We're celebrating the Declaration of Independence and 250 years of our country, and the Bill of Rights. This is the Seventh Amendment of the Constitution. It was also enumerated in the Bill of Rights because King George was taking people's property, and the right to trial by jury was the only thing that stopped him. This is fundamental American democracy, putting your faith in juries. Are some juries award too much? Possibly, but the fact that a big corporation like Uber or an insurance company knows they've got to face the eyes of 12 ordinary people and they have to stare them down, that's what makes them act more reasonably. If they don't have that fear, they'll just keep buying the laws. They know they can buy the laws. They've done it. They bought the laws in the legislature. They bought the laws in the initiative process, but they can't buy that jury. That jury is the only thing that stands between Uber running recklessly over the rights of people, be it having drivers that kill people or having robo-taxis that kill people, and us being safer and them making better cars and them taking more time with their background checks. It's the jury increasingly is the only thing in our democracy that has the integrity to stand up to the powerful and well-heeled and people like Uber. And that's why they're trying to stop it.
Putting the foot on the balance of justice.
Yeah, it's more than the foot. It's the whole body. They're trying to root out. They're trying to close the courthouse doors to people.
It's amazing that
and they don't even have examples of how juries are abusive. They're not even talking about juries being abusive. They're not even talking about insurance rates being too high. They're talking about the few handful of cases where attorneys have taken too much, or people may have gotten too much medical care. Because they can't. Because juries generally are not abusive. And most cases are handled appropriately in the system. They can't. And insurance rates aren't too high because we regulate them. They're not talking about all those usual triggers like runaway juries, sky high insurance rate. They can't because we don't have that. So instead, they're pointing to a few bad apples
And trying
and trying to throw out the whole barrel
why do we have a sexual carve out in this thing? Why do you think?
because they know that, first of all, it's accident cases and sexual assault is assault cases. So it wouldn't have applied anyway. But it does implicate other types of assault cases by Uber drivers now that they brought it up. Now, are assault cases by Uber drivers, which happens not infrequently, are they included? Including the guy who attacked the gay guy and ran him down the alley? Are they included? Because they excluded sexual assault cases. Are other assault cases by implication part of this when it's supposedly an accident? We don't know. More ambiguity. But
There was
they face, a tremendous reckoning on sexual assault by the New York Times investigation. Found once every 8 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted in Uber, and that has
8 minutes.
found once every 8 minutes, someone is sexually assaulted in Uber. That's outrageous, and the idea that Uber would exempt themselves from it was something that they wanted to inoculate themselves from. But the fact is, it's their background check system that allows those assaults to happen. Their deficient background system. And what the initiative does is assures that they can continue to have a deficient background check system because there's no consequences in most cases for it. So it does implicate the sexual assault issue.
It's funny to me also that they spend a lot of their careers or the company's history about assuring people that they were the designated driver, that they were the safe option.
Exactly.
And now they're doing the same thing with teens. They're recruiting teens to go sell
Influencers, yeah.
influencers to sell. Speak to me about that if you can. If like the notion that they perceive themselves or they try to put this image as the people who care, and ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, they have for years tried to say, we're the designated driver, don't drive home drunk. So now you're driving home drunk with someone who could sexually assault you, or you're driving home with someone who may have had a DUI because they didn't check the record clear enough. I mean, all of their promises are like hollow. And it's all because they don't have a good background check system. And they don't need to spend much money to increase their background check systems. So they just don't want to do it. In fact, why should they fight the idea that they have to do fingerprinting and criminal background checks on their drivers? It should be standard. And why shouldn't they be liable if there is a sexual assault in their vehicle? Because you know what? If they're liable when there's a sexual assault in their vehicle, it won't happen because they're going to put cameras in their vehicles. If they put cameras in their vehicles, there won't be sexual assaults in their vehicles. Lyfts are starting to put cameras in. Lyfts are allowing you to record on your phone off the app directly. But Uber is resisting. Uber doesn't want to do it, and Uber doesn't want to do it because it wants as many drivers on the road as possible, regardless of whether they're safe, regardless of whether they're going to assault your family members. They don't care, and they think they can roll in and buy the law.
Well, even Lyft, did we get something from Lyft saying they changed their user?
Waive your right to
Waive your
jury trial.
rights to jury trial is now part of it.
Arbitration?
Yeah.
Uber's got arbitration too,
Yeah.
which is why a lot of these cases you don't see. There are more cases, but it becomes a case if you hit a pedestrian because the pedestrian didn't sign arbitration. If you hit someone who's not part of the Uber, then it becomes a non-arbitration. But if it's about someone in an Uber, when you sign up for Uber, if something happens to you in an Uber, it's an arbitration. But if you're dealing with someone outside of an Uber, it's not arbitrable. That's why the Santa Barbara case is a case in court, because the drunk driver. I mean, this case is so outrageous. Let me just get it on the record. This is a case that we have a guy got to drive for Uber after having 2 DUIs, and a witness said he was driving 120 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour in Santa Barbara, and drunk, and they found an empty nitrous container in the car after he killed this woman who was in another car. She was a passenger in another car. And we know about the case because since she was in another car, she then signed the Uber arbitration agreement. But how many cases are there where it's the person in the Uber who's died and you're in arbitration that doesn't get public? Most of them.
There is another thing that I'm finding every time that I talk to somebody, and this has been a real problem for me, is well, yeah, we got a great case, signed a confidentiality agreement. And so for years, they have been paying out their bad deeds with money and making sure people don't talk to these.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they use confidentiality agreements for. And the victims have to take them if they want to get paid. And obviously, they want to get paid. And this is a way they've covered their trails by locking people into confidentiality agreements. There are, I have no doubt, thousands of stories like the one in Santa Barbara, but they're locked in a confidential settlement or a confidential arbitration, and we never see it. At least when the case goes to court. After it settles, you might not know the result, but the facts are out in the complaint. When it's an arbitration, you don't even see that. And when it's a confidential settlement, you don't see what's happened. So they've used confidentiality as a shield, and they're using this initiative as a sword.
That's great. Do you think that this sex case that just happened in Arizona, the verdict on that is going to open up things for at least the sexual part, or do you think it's a bellwether case?
I think it is a bellwether case, and I think that absolutely it's a bellwether case, and it gets to whether the company is going to have any responsibility for what they do when they know that someone is committed a sexual offense and they're driving for the company. I think it's going to have not only an effect on other people getting similar verdicts, but also on their policies. That's why they changed their background checks slightly 2 to 3 weeks after that verdict. Because now they're liable. They're doing a little bit better. If they're liable, they don't want to be liable. They're still not where they need to be, though. And this ballot measure that we're proposing for the ballot gets them where they need to be. It makes them strictly liable if something happens in the car, and it makes sure they have the highest background checks for their drivers. And it makes sure that if there is a confirmed report of someone committing a sexual offense and Uber knows about it, that when they match you with that driver, they tell you.
This is the counter initiative that you present. Can you start from the beginning on that, if you can, and just describe that? And we can end with that, I think.
All right. Well, and the counter initiative, the initiative that voters will face to counter Uber's initiative, says they have to do better background checks. They have to do fingerprinting. They have to do criminal checks. They have to know whether the person has a DUI, whether the person has a history of sexual assault, a history of domestic violence, when they give that person the right to drive for Uber, and it doesn't allow them to have people in those categories get a license to drive with Uber, because that is a license to kill. And it also says the company is strictly liable if there is a sexual assault in an Uber, which means they're going to need cameras and they're going to need to monitor, they're going to need to train their drivers. And it won't happen if they're liable strictly for that. Those are the types of measures that are needed. And we know that 8 out of 10 members of the public agree with that. If you're going to put someone in a vehicle late at night with someone else, you better make sure you know who they are.
I think there were 2 sort of phases to that.
The other initiative, I'm not sure is actually going to go forward, but I can talk about. This is the right to contract. There's another initiative to allow you to contract with an attorney without any limitations. And that is a counter initiative for the public just to say firmly, we have a right to contract. You can't put a limit on it. I'm not sure that initiative is actually going to go to the ballot, but we'll see.
So, you have anything?
Yeah. Jamie, we've talked to attorneys, and I understand why they want to be a part of this. And we've talked to, we know Uber, and we understand why they want to be a part of it. Why are you passionate about this?
Well, we're firmly in the court of accountability and the idea that everyone has the right to hold people who injure them accountable in a court of law. That's part of American democracy. It's what makes our laws in our country special. It's not the markets and the money that makes America prosperous. It's the rule of law. We all are accountable, whether it's Uber or some drunk guy in a bar. We all should be accountable. And this initiative defiles that fundamental notion of American democracy. So I'm totally offended by it. I'm totally offended by Uber. I've watched Uber do other things as well. Uber, for instance, does surveillance pricing on people where they charge you more if your battery is low. I mean, they'll do anything to make a buck. And companies like that deserve to be held accountable and punished. And this initiative would take away that punishment. So I feel confident that the public's going to side with us on this one. But it goes against everything we've established in America and in California, frankly, about accountability and justice and holding everyone equally accountable under the law. Just because you're a rich company doesn't mean you should be able to buy your way out of accountability.
So to finish off, sum up to me what the choices are for the public.
I mean, I think the choices are for the public are voting against your own right to have an attorney of your choice when you're injured in a car accident. I mean, or voting to hold the company accountable for its choice in drivers and making sure it does adequate background checks. And if people fall through that background checks, holding them strictly liable when something happens in an Uber that hurts you. I mean, it's about accountability versus a lack of accountability. And it's not about money, because this isn't going to save anyone money but Uber and maybe insurance companies. It's not going to save consumers money. This is about accountability and holding those accountable, everyone accountable under the law.
This is my last question. Uber, yes, is putting out the initiative, but if this passes, it doesn't just affect Uber.
No, exactly. This affects all motor vehicle accident cases, not just Uber. Every accident with everybody, whether you're in an accident with a commercial vehicle, a truck, or with just another driver in your insurance company, this will allow big companies to get out of their responsibility to the injured accident victims. And if you have an injured accident victim in your family or your circle, you know it's not fair already. People become paralyzed, they become paraplegic. They've lost their mobility, they've lost their lives. The very least we can do, if we can find a way to do it, is to get them a couple of $1 million so they can live more comfortably with their lives. With this initiative, they're not going to have that. They're going to have the public assistance system, which is going to mean taxpayers are going to pay more. Taxpayers are going to pay more for this initiative because when people can't hold the people who are the wrongdoers accountable, they have to go to the taxpayer. Medicaid is not going to get repaid. Medicare is not going to get repaid. Insurance companies aren't going to get repaid if you can't get an attorney to make the wrongdoer be held accountable. Wrongdoers don't often admit that they were wrong. You have to often prove it, or you have to have an attorney to threaten to prove it. They don't volunteer, yeah, hey, I'm responsible. You need an attorney to do it. And if you don't have that attorney, the wrongdoer is not going to pay, and we're all going to pay more for that problem.
You know what's amazing is that anybody who's needed a lawyer and been in that situation understands exactly what you're talking about, but people who haven't might believe 75% sounds good. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 75% sounds great, except it's complete bullshit. Not only won't you get an attorney, so you're not going to get anything, but even if you believe Uber and they're saying, we're going to get you 75%, but the medical costs are going to come out of the 75%, which is what they're saying, even though it's not true, then you're not getting 75%. They're not, either way, you're not getting 75%.
I'm explaining that to somebody who's never been in an accident, doesn't understand what the lawyers mean. You know,
Well, people are very suspicious of lawyers. People are very suspicious of lawyers, and they should be, because there are some bad lawyers. But if you've ever been seriously injured or know someone is seriously injured, the only way that they can actually see themselves through the system to get what's a reasonable recovery is by getting a lawyer who's going to invest in the resources to prove your case, which means doctors, x-rays, testing, animation in court. I mean, these cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a lawyer's not going to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars if they're not going to get their fee at the end of the day, because they can't get their fee because the medical expenses are more than 25%. It's just never going to happen. So we will lose a tremendous resource we have on our side as injured consumers. The shitty lawyers are not investing that anyway. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here?
The Trojan horse.
Yeah, Trojan horse.
Jamie, one more for me, which is Uber is our best friend. They give us rides. It's wonderful. But you mentioned something, and I think there's more about how they fuck you when your battery's dying. Can you give us just a few of those that people have talked about that Uber's
Well, Uber, for example, doesn't charge us all the same price. We have done tests where people are in the same place at the same time going to the same place, and there's a differential in price. And it has to do with the way they surveil us and price us based on our personhood. So it could be, we don't know why, it could be because someone had a lower battery life, or it could be because they knew someone had a flight to make it in an airport and there was more urgency. But we've proven that two people, the same place, same time, going to the same place, same time, are charged different prices. That's surveillance pricing. There was in New York, then they deny they do that. They deny they do that. But there's a law in New York that says if you do surveillance pricing, you have to disclose it. And Uber discloses it in New York that they do surveillance pricing, even though they deny everywhere else they do surveillance pricing. So we know they're doing surveillance pricing because they actually disclose it in New York, even though when we confront them, oh, we had someone investigate that battery life thing, but we don't monitor your battery life. But yet there's two different prices for the same trip at the same time. And it's, you could do it. You could run that experiment right now with two people on two phones and it would work.
And the battery life is because it's more urgent to get somewhere?
Yeah.
battery will die
Yeah,
before
yeah.
you get there.
Yeah. That's
Hey,
good.
Jamie, thanks so much.
My
man.
pleasure.
I really appreciate your time. It's become clearer and clearer with your explanation.
All right, good.
So
Thanks for doing this.